Number 1. Back in the early 2000s, I was recently divorced and living alone with my toddler son. In the middle of the night in winter, I woke up to this voice from downstairs saying, "Should I do it? I should do it. I won't hurt her at first." I was groggy and initially thought I was dreaming. There was a bit of silence and then,
"No, do it. She deserves this."
That got my full attention as I realized there was definitely someone in my house. My son was spending the weekend with my parents and I didn't have a phone. I frantically glanced around for something to defend myself with. All I saw was an empty soda bottle and a safety pin. Yeah, that's helpful. I heard the first stair creak as this guy started up, and my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. I hurled myself out my bedroom window onto the roof. I had taken the screen out in the summer because I liked to Star Watch, and jumped down into the dumpster. Climbed out with sheer adrenaline pumping through me. I ran to my neighbors in the snow, who locked his door and called the police. They arrested the guy, and here's what happened. I dated a friend of his and met him once. I didn't even know his last name. He'd become obsessed with me and started watching me from my backyard. The neighbor gave a statement to the police saying that he had seen him there at least 20 times in the last 2 months, and thought it was my husband. He got drunk, punched my front porch window out, and they arrested him with a knife and nylon rope, still looking for me in my house. This didn't have too terrible of an effect on him. A couple months in jail. I wasn't out for blood or anything, but then he tried to murder his ex-wife and went to prison for almost 30 years, so it's not like I live in terror. I do own several guns and carry a knife in my purse, but honestly, I've used that knife to cut cheese for crackers more than anything, and the pistol stays in the nightstand. It's for peace of mind. I really don't have hard feelings towards this guy. He essentially made me aware of the fact that I'm strong enough to flee and protect myself, and I won't just lay there and die like a coward. If my son had been there, I would have killed him with my bare hands. Number 2. Growing up, I spent every summer vacation at my grandparents' house in rural Tennessee. When I say rural, I mean their town was literally a cluster of homes with a singular one-lane road as the only way in and out. 45 minutes from the nearest freeway on-ramp, 30 minutes to a grocery store, and an hour and a half to a Sam's Club or Costco. My grandparents still live here and make that drive monthly. What I'm trying to say is that this is about as remote as it gets. I'd play outside for hours and hours, and maybe only see 2 or 3 cars. It's a lot more built up now, but it was nice while it lasted. It was around 11:30 p.m. Me and my dad couldn't sleep because it was an especially hot and muggy night. We decided to go for a drive through the hilly, curvy back roads that I absolutely loved, and still do. There was a scenic access site that was just a clearing overlooking a cliff about 15 minutes further into the woods from my grandparents' house. It was down a narrow 2-track lined with a couple of dilapidated trailers lining it every 1/4 mile, roughly. Due to the isolation and lack of any real police presence, this area was lousy with meth during this time. There was a local rumor of some inbred cult in the woods. Keep in mind, it was midnight by the time we got to the parking lot for the overlook, which was just a gravel pit. My dad has always had a bit of an intuition, and asked me if I really wanted to get out of the car. That made me hesitant myself, but I saw the amount of fireflies that were out, and catching them was my favorite pastime. Armed with a flashlight and an old Tupperware container with some holes drilled in it, we set off down the path to the cliff. We immediately heard noises in the woods, heavy footsteps, way too heavy for a deer, and there wasn't really a bear presence in this area. The woods were unusually quiet besides that. We both thought we saw something hide behind a tree out of the corner of our eyes, and I didn't realize he saw it too until we brought it up in the car. Here's where it gets freaky. Once we made it down the path to the cliff, we saw an outline of a man. He was about my dad's height, 5'10", but he was as thin as a rail. He couldn't have weighed more than 120 pounds. Here's the thing. He wasn't admiring the beautiful moonlight scenery over the cliff. He was standing perpendicular to it, just staring off into the trees, perfectly still. My dad slightly nudges me in the direction of our car. As I started walking back, He shined the flashlight on the man. As soon as the light shone on the man, my dad gasped and dropped the flashlight before literally picking me up and sprinting full force back to our car. As we peeled out, I had no idea what the fuck was going on. His face looked like a goddamn melted candle, he said after a few minutes of silence. After we pulled out onto the main road, apparently the man had no nose, just 2 nostril holes in his face. The way he was described sounded like a burn victim. As we brought it up to my grandmother the next day at breakfast, she immediately turned pale. Apparently there was a meth lab explosion up in the hills a few months prior, and they were unable to rebuild the building, so they resorted to making their product in the woods, and are very defensive, even homicidal, about their stash. Number 3. I started my first job at a gas station about 4 years ago. I would have been 16. I worked there for about a year before all this happened. Some info about myself before I start the story. I just turned 17 when it happened. I'm pretty thin. I'm only 4'9", and I'm about as threatening as a butterfly. The gas station that I worked at sat atop a hill, with water tanks on the side behind it. I wouldn't say it was in a sketchy area or anything, because it sat next to a really busy street in Utah. We got a lot of traffic during the day, but it always got slow at night. When I first started, there was nothing out of the ordinary that happened until I started noticing this one customer. He came in every day. You could tell he was older, perhaps in his late 40s. He started as just a normal regular who came in every day, sometimes multiple times a day. On my 17th birthday, my parents had brought up a balloon to the store. He'd come in about an hour after they left. He asked me if it was my birthday and how old I had turned. I told him that I had just turned 17. No, I'll always regret telling him that. After that, he started coming in more often than usual. He even came in when I wasn't working. He would ask my coworkers what days I worked that week, what my shifts were, and who I'd be working with. We worked in 2-man teams, so that no one was ever alone on a shift. One day, he'd come in and asked what time I got off that night. I told him midnight because I didn't really want him knowing what time I got off. The next day, he came in screaming at me, telling me that I'd lied to him, that he came up and was waiting for me and I wasn't there. I told him I was sorry and that my coworker had let me out early. He didn't come in for about 3 weeks after that. I thought he was gone and everything was over, but little did I know. After the 3 weeks, I came in for my usual 2 to 10 shift. My coworkers told me that someone had brought me in flowers. It was a big bouquet of daylilies, which were my favorite flower, so I had assumed they'd come from my boyfriend. When I read the card that had come with them, I was wrong. Good morning, gorgeous. Happy late birthday. I bet you look beautiful today. I'll see you when you get off. I was so disgusted, I thought I was going to puke. I showed the card to my coworker, and she had no words. She asked me to explain what was going on, but I told her I didn't want to get into it. Work went on like normal, and everything was fine. I got off at 10 that night, so I started to count out my till at about 9:45. I went to clock out. I got a terrible feeling in my stomach. I felt like someone was punching me over and over, telling me to listen. I wish I would have. Our manager made us park in the back, so that the customers could have the front and the side parking. The oddest thing is that where we were parked, there were no lights or cameras, so walking out to our cars at night was already horrible, but this time it was terrifying. I told my coworker goodbye and walked out the door. I turned the corner of the building towards the back, and there he was, standing next to my driver's side door. There was a black truck parked behind my car. I assumed that was his, even though I wasn't sure. "Hey, baby, did you get my flowers?" he said to me. I didn't respond. I just continued to walk towards my car, going straight for the door handle. He tried to tell me multiple times how my car wasn't working and that I should let him give me a ride home. I shut my door and locked it while he continued to ramble excuses to get me out of my car. I started to back out, kind of slowly. My light shined into the back window of the truck. I saw a hooded guy looking through the back seat of the truck. I continued to back up and pretend I wasn't already freaking out. My light shined where a dumpster sat behind our building, catching a hooded man walking out from behind it. I was full-blown freaking out now, and there was no way I could hide it. I screeched out of the parking lot and drove down the street. I turned into a neighborhood to make sure that they weren't following me. I didn't want them to know where I lived. I don't know what his intentions were that night, but I have a good idea. I never saw him again after that. So creepy guy that tried to kidnap me, I hope we never meet again. Number 4. First things first. This is not my story, but my father's. This happened in the summer of 1993. My dad and his girlfriend, now my stepmother, were living in Cardiff, Wales, in the city centre. Not a particularly high crime area. A lot of student accommodation. I won't give the exact location there, but there was a cafe nearby named the Warm as Toast Cafe. 6 a.m. My dad gets up and walks down to the kitchen to get his morning coffee. As he walks into the kitchen, he's welcomed by a random man sat at the kitchen table staring at him. Being the cool, collected guy he is, instead of freaking out, my dad asks the guy if he wants a cup of coffee. Breakfast intruder agrees and joins him. A few minutes later, my dad's girlfriend comes in, also doesn't freak out and offers to make him some breakfast. So the three of them sit down, have breakfast, and have a chat for 20 minutes or so. Apparently, the conversation was weird and a bit nonsensical, but they didn't say what it was about. Breakfast finishes, and they escort the breakfast intruder through the front door. After he leaves, they start freaking out and naturally call the police. Police come, take statements, etc. Later in the day, they're contacted by the police, saying that they apprehended the intruder. Turns out the guy was a paranoid schizophrenic and was breaking into odd-numbered houses on the street. My dad was the second house he entered. The first house he'd gone into, next door, was empty. This is where he left his tools, a sawed-off shotgun, and a lot of ammo. His plan was to shoot anyone in the odd-numbered houses on the street. When the police arrested him, he told them that my dad and his girlfriend were the nicest couple he'd ever met, and that they'd stopped him from carrying out his plan. When people say I'm too laid back for my own good, I tell them this story, and it never fails to shut them up. Number 5. First of all, let me say that I live in Brazil, and we are kind of in a really bad situation. Basically, our healthcare, education, and security are garbage at the moment because of corruption and corporate greed. I'm a male. I'm 24 years old. Last month, after I left from work, I got to the bus stop. Everything was normal, except my bus was really late. So I got on another bus that gets me a little further from my house, and I have to walk a little of the way to get to it. The bus arrives at the bus stop. I proceed to walk to the bus. When a car speeds over the sidewalk, a guy inside holds a gun to my face. "Get the fuck inside the car!" he shouted angrily. Now, at the jump scare, I dropped my headphones, as I'm always listening to music, so I proceeded to get near the door and pick up my headphones at the same time. "Hurry, motherfucker! Get in the car!" He was getting very impatient, and suddenly, while I'm holding the door and trying to open it, I see a blind spot where he can't see me clearly, so I run like it's the fucking devil behind me in the opposite direction of the car. I hear screeches and gunshot. I bolt into the first house that I can see, and I have nowhere left to run, just surrounded by walls. I look behind me and see the man running after me. I fall to the floor, covering my head with my arms, thinking, this is it. I'm just gonna get shot in the head. But nothing happens. So I open my eyes and I see that the guy that was running was just someone else near the street when the gunshots started. There were 3 ladies in the house, and they helped me get my head back together before I left a couple of minutes later. So whoever you are, and whatever you're going to do to me, let's not meet again. So my fiancé and I live in a fairly nice apartment complex. In the last few weeks, a cat has appeared and has been meowing outside for people. So the animal suckers we are start to feed the cat. Milk, ham, so on. And it became a nightly ritual for us to hear the meowing before we go to bed, and then we get up and feed and pet the cat. We named the cat Corndog. Well, Corndog got to the point she would scratch our door because she knows we're suckers. Well, the last few nights, Corndog has been missing. My fiancé still checked every night. My fiancé is a nurse and was working late last night, so I was cleaning up and watching some TV when I hear scratching on the door. And I get very excited because we're worried about Corndog. As I approach the door, I can even hear her meowing. When I open the door, it's not Corndog at the door. It's this strange man on all fours. As I opened the door, he was meowing. I slammed the door and grabbed my fiancé's gun and went back to the door. When I opened the door, he was gone, but I still heard meowing downstairs. I made sure that my fiancé got home okay, and not to open the door for cats, but I'm freaked out. Number 7. First off, I want to apologize. I promised a second post, but I had to put it off because of life. I'm planning a wedding, I have a full-time job, and the craziness that I talked about in the first post. I want to tell you that Corndog is okay. She left for almost a month, then suddenly popped up again. Now for that creepy cat guy. A few days after I posted the last post, it rained really hard. My fiancée was on her way home, so I grabbed an umbrella and went to wait for her. But when I opened the door, I saw these weird tracks, circles that dragged. So I followed them from one entrance around the 3 floors to another entrance. So that's when we got the police involved. We were not the only ones that saw this crazy cat man, but he only got worse. Not too long after the police started visiting, the man started to come later. I was in bed. It was about 2:17 in the morning when I heard the scratches. I woke my fiancée up and we both went to the door. Hearing the scratches, I heard a cough as I got up to the door. So I told my fiancée to get her gun. When we opened the door, we had scratch marks down our door, but no one in sight. I thought I heard someone running off, but I was on the 3rd floor and was not going anywhere. When I went to work the next morning, there was a dead bird on our welcome mat. Yes, we called the cops and told them everything. So night comes, and I always lock up the house. That always consists of me locking the door and turning the alarm on. Well, out of habit, I opened the door to look for Corndog, like I always do. I heard mewing, so I walked over to the stairs. Yeah, I know it's dumb. I was just wanting her to be okay. That's when I saw the man. He looked right at me, and I swear it looked like he had cat eyes. His eyes were the same as a cat's. I screamed like a tiny girl, even though I'm a 6'5", tattooed, bearded man, and then went to my apartment and locked up, and quickly called the cops. On the weekend, we were watching a movie in our living room when we heard some commotion outside. We went out on the porch to see what was happening, and that's when I saw the most bizarre thing. We heard someone screaming, but we saw the cat guy running out of our building. He was hissing as he ran. We watched as he ran all the way to the forest. The last time I saw this man was the following Tuesday after that weekend. When my fiancée leaves for work, I always go onto the porch to tell her I love her and watch her leave. When I did that, I watched her pull out. I decided to sit and drink my coffee till I had to get ready. Well, that's when I saw him. The cat guy was on all fours in the woods, just looking at me. That was the last time I saw this guy. About a week after that, Corndog started showing up again, and we've been feeding her. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like my narrations, or the music that I compose for my channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And remember to vote for what type of video you'd like to see tomorrow using the cards on this video, and whichever has the highest votes will be tomorrow's theme. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.